The silence of the Ridgewater woods wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the heavy, suffocating silence that precedes a storm. Ryan Mitchell, a man who had spent a decade navigating the deadliest war zones as a Navy SEAL, knew that silence better than anyone. He had come back to this sleepy town to bury the ghosts of his past, to trade the cacophony of gunfire for the rustle of autumn leaves. But as he stood on the edge of the tree line, the air felt wrong. It tasted of copper and cold sweat. Suddenly, the stillness was shattered by a frantic scratching against the damp earth. Out of the creeping fog emerged a small, golden-furred terrier, its coat matted with mud and burrs. The dog wasn't barking. It was whimpering a low, guttural sound of pure, unadulterated terror that resonated deep within Ryan's chest. The dog stopped at Ryan's boots, its body trembling so violently that its claws rattled against the frozen ground. With a hesitant tilt of its head, the creature opened its mouth, and something small and metallic hit the dirt with a soft thud. Ryan knelt, his knees cracking in the cold air. There, lying amidst the decaying leaves, was a silver earring, a delicate filigree design that looked like it belonged at a high school prom or a Sunday church service. But it wasn't the craftsmanship that caught his eye. It was the wet, glistening smear of fresh blood coating the metal. The dog let out a sharp, urgent whine, nudging Ryan's hand with its wet nose before turning back toward the impenetrable darkness of the deep woods. Its eyes weren't just pleading for help, they were demanding it. In that moment, the civilian facade Ryan had meticulously built over the last 6 months crumbled. The man who drank coffee at the local diner and nodded politely to neighbors vanished. In his place stood the operator, the hunter who could track a shadow through a blizzard. His pulse slowed, his vision sharpened, and that old, familiar hum of adrenaline began to vibrate in his veins. He looked at the earring, then at the dog, and finally into the black void of the forest. Every instinct honed in the mountains of Afghanistan screamed the same thing. Someone was being hunted, and the clock was ticking down to 0. The peace of Ridgewater was a lie, a thin veil draped over a throat-slitting reality. This is just the beginning of a descent into a conspiracy that runs deeper than the roots of these ancient trees. Who does this earring belong to? And what kind of monster is lurking in the shadows of a peaceful town? If you're ready for a journey that will test the limits of loyalty and the true meaning of a soldier's oath, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss a single second of this hunt, because the ending will force you to question everything you thought you knew about the bond between man and his most faithful companion. Ridgewater was supposed to be his sanctuary, his place of healing. But as Ryan watched the small dog disappear back into the brush, beckoning him to follow, he realized that you can never truly leave the battlefield behind. The battlefield follows you. It waits in the shadows of your hometown, hiding behind the white picket fences and the friendly smiles of people you thought you knew. Ryan took a deep breath, the cold air stinging his lungs, and stepped off the path. He wasn't just a veteran anymore. He was a man on a mission. And God help anyone who stood between a Navy SEAL and the innocent soul he was sworn to protect. The hunt had officially begun. Ryan Mitchell didn't return home to the sound of trumpets or the cheers of a grateful nation. Instead, he was greeted by a silence so profound it felt like a physical weight. After 14 years of serving as a Navy SEAL, moving through the most dangerous shadows on the planet, the quiet of his mother's empty house was the most unsettling environment he had ever faced. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the settling walls seemed to whisper the names of those he had left behind. He was a man built for war, now trapped in a world of peace that felt entirely alien to him. The ghosts don't stay in the past, they walk beside him in the present. Ryan is perpetually haunted by a single, devastating moment in Afghanistan, the haunting gaze of a child caught in the crossfire, a life snuffed out in the chaos of a mission. That image is burned into his retinas, a permanent scar on his soul. Compounding this guilt is the hollow ache of his mother's passing. While he was out saving the world in some nameless desert, the woman who gave him life breathed her last alone, waiting for a son who never came. He traded his family for a flag, and now he's left with neither. To Ryan, his military uniform wasn't just clothing, it was a second skin. It was a suit of armor that protected him not just from bullets, but from the complexities of civilian life. In the Navy SEALs, every breath had a purpose, every movement was calculated, and every man to his left and right was a brother. Now, stripped of his rank and his mission, he feels naked and exposed. He wanders through the rooms of his childhood home like a stranger, looking at old photographs and failing to recognize the boy he used to be. The transition from a lethal weapon to a regular citizen is a bridge he doesn't know how to cross. This is the brutal reality of PTSD. The war never truly ends, it just changes locations. Ryan's struggle isn't about physical wounds, but the psychological fragmentation of an elite warrior who no longer has a war to fight. He is a man searching for a new identity in a society that admires his service but can never truly understand his sacrifice. As he stands in the shadows of his mother's house, Ryan Mitchell isn't just a retired soldier. He is a ticking time bomb of unresolved trauma, waiting for a new spark to ignite the warrior spirit that still burns fiercely beneath his skin. The clock struck 5 a.m., a time when the world is caught in the suffocating silence between night and dawn. For Ryan, this was his sanctuary, a time to outrun the ghosts of his past. The rhythm of his sneakers hitting the pavement was the only heartbeat he cared about. But today, the rhythm was broken. Out of the swirling gray fog emerged a small golden figure. It wasn't a threat, but it was an obstacle. A young golden retriever, his fur damp with dew, stood squarely in Ryan's path, his small frame trembling not from cold, but from a desperate, vibrating energy. Ryan tried to weave around the animal, shouting a gruff command to go home. He didn't have time for distractions. He was a man built on discipline and isolation. But the dog, whom he would later call Scout, refused to be ignored. He didn't bark playfully or wag his tail. Instead, he let out a low, guttural whine and darted toward Ryan, nipping gently at his hem before sprinting toward the edge of the road. He would stop, look back, and fix Ryan with a gaze so intense, so pleading, that it felt almost human. It was a look of pure, unadulterated desperation that pierced through Ryan's cold exterior. In that moment, Ryan's world shifted. The civilian runner vanished, and the elite Special Forces operative took over. He recognized the behavior instantly. This wasn't the aimless wandering of a stray. This was a lead-to-target maneuver. He had seen it 100 times in the mountains of Afghanistan, military canines leading their handlers toward hidden IEDs or trapped comrades. The dog wasn't playing. He was on a mission. The way Scout paced back and forth at the mouth of the Miller Forest Trail was a tactical alert. There was something or someone in those woods that needed Ryan, and the dog knew he was the only one who could help. The logical part of Ryan's brain told him to turn back, to call animal control, to stay out of the shadows. But his warrior's instinct, the one he thought he had buried, roared back to life. He felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, the sharpening of his senses. He tightened his laces and adjusted his stance. With a heavy breath that turned to mist in the freezing air, Ryan abandoned his planned route. He turned away from the safety of the streetlights and followed the golden streak as it vanished into the swallowing darkness of Miller Forest. He didn't know it yet, but that single step was about to change the trajectory of his life forever. The deeper they ventured into the emerald shadows of the forest, the heavier the air became. Scout wasn't just wandering, he was hunting a ghost. With every frantic sniff and low whine, the golden retriever led Ryan away from the known paths and into a nightmare. The silence of the woods was suffocating, broken only by the crunch of dry leaves under boots and the rhythmic panting of a dog who knew exactly what horrors lay ahead. Ryan felt the familiar prickle of adrenaline, the kind he used to feel on recon missions, but this time, the stakes were painfully personal. Scout stopped abruptly, pawing at a patch of thorny brush. Ryan's heart hammered against his ribs as he knelt. There, tangled in the roots, was a simple elastic hair tie. A few feet away, the metallic glint of a smartphone caught the fading light. Its screen shattered into a spiderweb of glass, its casing smeared with a dark, rusted crimson. These weren't just lost items. They were screams frozen in time. Ryan's military instincts screamed of a struggle, a desperate, violent fight for life that had unfolded right where he stood. Then, Scout nudged a leather object half buried in the mud. It was a wallet. Ryan flipped it open with trembling fingers, his breath hitching as he looked at the ID card inside. Emma Carter. The name hit him like a physical blow, dredging up memories of a gentler time. Emma wasn't just a stranger. She was the heart of the local animal rescue, a woman his late mother had cherished for her boundless kindness and spirit. She was the kind of person who would go to the ends of the earth for a stray soul, and now it seemed the earth itself was trying to swallow her whole. But Scout wasn't finished. The dog's behavior shifted from urgency to a profound, heavy sadness. He led Ryan to the base of a gnarled ancient oak tree, his whining turning into a long, mournful howl that echoed through the canopy. The dog began to dig frantically at the roots. Ryan joined him, his fingers clawing through the cold, damp soil until they struck something hard and metallic. He pulled it out, and the weight of it felt like lead in his soul. It was a heavy leather collar, its buckle bent as if by an immense force, stained with the same grim evidence as the phone. This belonged to Max the Massive, loyal dog who was Emma's constant shadow and protector. Looking at the mangled collar, the brutal reality set in. Max hadn't run away in fear. He had stood his ground against an unimaginable horror to protect his mistress until his very last breath. The blood on the ground wasn't just Emma's. It was the price of a dog's ultimate loyalty. As Ryan gripped the cold leather, his grief transformed into a cold, sharp fury. The forest was no longer just a crime scene. It was a battlefield, and the monsters who did this were still out there, lurking in the thickening dark. With the evidence clutched tightly in his hand, the only thread connecting him to his missing sister, Ryan steps into the local sheriff's office. He expects urgency. He expects a mobilization of forces. Instead, he is met with the stagnant air of a room where time seems to have stopped. The ceiling fans whir lazily, and the officers present don't even bother to look up from their coffee. This isn't the sanctuary of justice Ryan hoped for. It feels more like a graveyard for forgotten cases. Every second Emma is gone feels like an eternity to him. But here, in the heart of the town's authority, his desperation is met with a deafening, suffocating silence. Behind the main desk sits Sheriff Tom Davis, a man whose badge seems to have lost its shine years ago. As Ryan lays out the evidence, the signs of a struggle, the misplaced items, Davis doesn't even lean forward to look. Instead, he lets out a dry, mocking chuckle that grates on Ryan's nerves like sandpaper. With a dismissive wave of a nicotine-stained hand, Davis scoffs at the evidence. He leans back, his uniform straining against his belly, and casually suggests that Emma simply got tired of the small-town life and ran off with a boyfriend. To Davis, this isn't a kidnapping. It's just another rebellious girl seeking a thrill, a narrative that conveniently requires zero effort from his department. But Ryan is not a civilian who can be easily intimidated or lied to. Years of elite military service have sharpened his instincts to a razor's edge. He doesn't just see a lazy cop. He sees a man who is hiding something behind a veil of incompetence. As Davis continues his dismissive tirade, Ryan notices the slight tremor in the sheriff's hand and the way his eyes avoid the evidence bag. The air in the room grows heavy with a sudden, violent tension. Ryan realizes this isn't just about laziness, it's about complicity. The very man sworn to protect this town is the one building a wall around the truth. The realization hits Ryan like a physical blow. In this town, the law isn't a shield, it's a cage. This moment marks a chilling turning point in our story. We are witnessing a profound clash of archetypes, the honor of the soldier versus the corruption of the bureaucrat. Ryan represents the protector, a man who lives by a code of sacrifice and duty. In contrast, Davis represents the parasite, someone who uses his position of power to hide his own rot. This confrontation highlights a terrifying reality. When the system designed to save us becomes the one that betrays us, where do we turn? Ryan's mission has just evolved. He is no longer just searching for a missing person. He is now at war with a shadow government that has turned his hometown into a hunting ground. The hunter has realized that the hounds are on the side of the wolves. Ryan is no longer just a man looking for answers. He is a predator hunting for the truth. Utilizing the advanced signals intelligence and investigative protocols drilled into him by the SEALs, he bypasses the local firewall of Ridgewater's digital archives. The deeper he digs, the more the town's peaceful facade begins to crumble. He isn't looking for a single mistake. He's looking for a signature, a pattern that the local authorities were too lazy or too compromised to hide properly. The discovery is bone-chilling. Over the last 5 years, 3 other young women have vanished from Ridgewater. Their profiles were eerily similar: outsiders, travelers, or those without strong family ties. But it's the official paperwork that reveals the true horror. Every single case was closed within 48 hours with the same cold bureaucratic stamp: voluntarily left the jurisdiction. It's a systematic erasure of human lives, a conveyor belt of disappearances hidden behind a wall of manufactured indifference. As Ryan follows the money trail, one name begins to surface like a shark in dark water: Victor Crane. Crane isn't just a wealthy businessman. He is the pulse of Ridgewater. He owns the vast abandoned industrial zones on the outskirts of town, places where screams would be swallowed by the wind. More importantly, Ryan finds the financial tethers. Crane is the primary donor to Sheriff Davis's re-election campaigns and the benefactor of the local police pension fund. The law in this town doesn't serve the people. It serves the man who signs the checks. The silence of the motel room is suddenly shattered by the vibration of Ryan's burner phone. He hasn't given this number to anyone. He picks up, and a voice smooth, cultured, and dripping with lethal arrogance fills his ear. It's Victor Crane. He doesn't offer threats. He offers a friendly piece of advice. Crane tells Ryan that some secrets are buried so deep that anyone who tries to dig them up ends up filling the hole themselves. He confirms what Ryan already suspected. He hasn't just walked into a crime scene. He has stepped directly into a hornet's nest of a global scale. The game has changed from a search mission to a war for survival. The silence of the suburbs is suddenly broken by a chilling realization. As Ryan glides through the familiar streets, he notices a shadow that refuses to leave his Tyla-heavy, black SUV with windows as dark as the intentions of those inside. But where an ordinary man would feel his heart race with fear, Ryan feels something entirely different: a cold, sharp sense of familiarity. For the first time in years, the fog in his mind clears. He isn't the victim being stalked. He is a predator who has finally found his scent. The game has changed, and the hunter is about to become the hunted. Returning to his mother's house, Ryan doesn't head for the kitchen or the bedroom. He moves with a newfound purpose toward a hidden corner of the basement. With steady breaths, he inputs a code into a heavy steel safe, a legacy left behind, perhaps for this very moment. As the heavy door creaks open, the scent of gun oil and cold metal fills the air. This isn't just a box of tools. It's an altar of his former life. The transition is instantaneous. The civilian facade crumbles, and the elite soldier, buried under layers of grief and confusion, stands tall once again. One by one, he pulls out the instruments of his trade: a matte black handgun, its weight perfect in his palm; night vision goggles that have seen the darkest corners of the world; and tactical gear that fits him like a second skin. As he checks the slide of his weapon, the metallic clack echoes through the quiet house like a death knell for his enemies. Every piece of equipment he dons is a layer of armor for his soul. The soldier hasn't just returned. He has been reborn in the crucible of necessity. But he isn't going into this darkness alone. Scout, the dog who was once trembling and broken by the same invisible forces, undergoes a terrifyingly beautiful transformation. Sensing the shift in Ryan's energy, the dog's whimpers turn into a low, guttural vibration of readiness. Scout stands at his side, muscles tensed, eyes locked on the door, mirroring the lethal focus of his master. They are no longer two survivors of trauma. They are a synchronized unit, a man and his hound, ready to unleash hell on whoever dared to follow them into the shadows. The hunt begins now. Standing amidst the shadows of a flickering safe house, Ryan realized that the monster he was hunting had grown too large for one man to slay. The human trafficking network wasn't just a gang, it was a hydra with heads in every dark corner of the city. To tear it down, he needed more than just skill. He needed the kind of brothers who had crawled through the mud of hell and back with him. He picked up a burner phone and dialed a number etched into his soul. A number that belonged to the only man he could trust with his life, Chief Jake Morrison. On the other end of the line, the silence was heavy until a gravelly voice broke through. Jake Morrison wasn't just a retired chief. He was a legend in the SEAL community, a man who had forgotten more about warfare than most generals ever knew. When Ryan laid out the grim reality of the trafficking ring, the stolen lives, the innocent victims, and the corruption shielding the villains, there was no hesitation. Jake didn't ask about the risks or the legality. In the world of elite warriors, some debts are paid in blood, and some oaths never expire. "Ryan," Jake said, his voice like grinding stones, "you had me at trafficking. If these bastards think they can operate in my backyard, they've got another thing coming." The team is always the team. The meeting was brief, held in the cold embrace of a rainy alleyway. The air between them crackled with the unspoken language of soldiers. This was the blood oath, a bond forged in the heat of firefights and the silence of covert extractions. For these men, the law was often a slow, bureaucratic cage that allowed predators to slip through the bars. To achieve true justice, they had to step into the gray, operating outside the system to protect those the system had failed. Jake brought more than just his gun. He brought a lifetime of tactical wisdom and a network of ghosts who could move through the city unseen. This part of the journey highlights a profound truth. In the darkest missions, trust is the only currency that matters. Ryan and Jake began to map out the enemy's jugular. They weren't just planning a rescue, they were orchestrating a surgical strike. The transition from a solo vendetta to a coordinated military-grade operation shifted the scales. As they stared at the maps, the weight of their shared history gave them a terrifying edge. They were no longer just investigators, they were the hunters, and the monsters were about to find out that some men are much more dangerous than the shadows they hide in. The darkness of the night was no longer a sanctuary. It was a shroud for the monstrosity Ryan was about to witness. As he and Scout reached the perimeter of the Johnson farm, the idyllic image of a rural homestead shattered like glass. This wasn't a place for crops or livestock. Through his thermal goggles, the landscape transformed into a chilling display of cold steel and lethal technology. The farm was a meticulously crafted facade, hiding a high-security black site that would put military installations to shame. Ryan felt a cold shiver crawl down his spine. This was Crane's secret heart fortress, hidden in plain sight. Watchtowers loomed like skeletal giants, their searchlights slicing through the mist with surgical precision. Every inch of the perimeter was laced with motion sensors and automated turrets. It was clear now. Crane hadn't just built a hideout. He had constructed a private gulag, a lawless vacuum where the screams of prisoners would be swallowed by the vast, indifferent countryside. Somewhere deep inside that labyrinth of concrete and wire, Emma was waiting. A frontal assault was out of the question. It would be a death sentence for them both. Ryan looked down at his most trusted ally. Scout's eyes were fixed on the facility, his small body vibrating with a mix of primal fear and unwavering duty. With a silent nod, the mission began. While Ryan remained the eyes on the ridge, Scout became the ghost in the machine. Utilizing his small stature, the brave dog navigated a treacherous path that no human could traverse. He slipped through a gap in the foundation, his fur brushing against cold iron, inches away from high-voltage wires that hummed with a deadly song. Scout moved like a shadow through the ventilation ducts, his senses overwhelmed by the smell of ozone and sterile chemicals. Finally, he reached a heavy steel door with a small observation port. There, huddled in the corner of a dimly lit cell, was Emma. She looked frail, a ghost of the vibrant girl Ryan remembered, but her eyes still held a spark of defiance. For a brief, heart-stopping second, their gazes met through the glass. A silent promise was made. They were coming for her. But the moment of hope was shattered by the heavy thud of combat boots echoing down the corridor. The tension snapped like a dry twig. A guard's flashlight swept the floor, the beam catching the glint of Scout's collar. Ryan, watching the thermal feed from the ridge, felt his breath hitch if Scout was caught. The entire mission would end in a bloodbath. But Scout was no ordinary animal. With a burst of calculated chaos, he lunged at a stack of metal canisters, sending them crashing to the floor in the opposite direction. As the guards scrambled toward the noise, shouting into their radios, Scout vanished into the darkness of a maintenance hatch. He hadn't just survived. He had successfully distracted the enemy and protected Ryan's position, proving that in this war of giants, the smallest heart often beats the strongest. The atmosphere, thick with death, was suddenly torn apart by a sharp explosion. Ryan didn't choose negotiation. He chose destruction. The generator, the heart powering the lights for the entire farm, exploded into a brilliant fireball, plunging Crane's base into pitch blackness. Chaos erupted immediately. Screams, rushing footsteps, and the clatter of weapons loading echoed everywhere. Using the cover of night and the gray smoke, Ryan moved like a true ghost, closing in on the central barn. Every step was a precise calculation. Every breath carried the killing intent of a predator hunting in the dark. Bullets tore through the wind, shredding hay bales and wooden posts, but nothing could stop the Special Forces soldiers' advance. Ryan breached the barn amidst a hail of gunfire from the panicked guards. He didn't flinch. His cold eyes swept every corner, taking down the soldiers blocking his path with terrifyingly accurate shots. Meanwhile, in the damp and foul-smelling basement, Scout, the loyal little dog, had caught his master's scent. He squeezed through narrow gaps, guiding Hope into the darkest part of the prison. In the dark corner of the dungeon, Emma lay there, her breath shallow and her body covered in wounds from the savage torture of Crane's men. She had almost given up until she felt the wet, warm touch of Scout. The appearance of the small dog was like a miracle, awakening a strong survival instinct within her. Scout's loyal gaze and small, encouraging bark gave Emma the strength to rise. She was no longer a weak victim. Her pain now turned into a fire of hatred, urging her to survive to witness the downfall of those who had tormented her. The dungeon door collapsed under the pressure of Ryan's kick. He rushed in like a guardian angel, eliminating the last two guards before they could pull their triggers. Seeing Emma gasping for air, the warrior's iron heart tightened. Without a wasted word, Ryan scooped Emma up, shielding her with his own body. He carried her out, just as the headlights from Crane's reinforcement convoy began to sweep across the field, roaring as they approached. Just a second slower, and they would have been trapped in a suffocating encirclement. The race against death truly began now, with the sound of engines and the enemy's hunting dogs right at their backs. Ryan thought the safe house would provide a moment of respite, a fleeting chance to sharpen his blade and plan his next move against Victor Crane. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and the hum of a portable server. But in the world of high-stakes shadows, silence isn't peace, it's a countdown. Just as he began to piece together Crane's financial web, the perimeter sensors screamed a warning that came a second too late. The sanctuary he thought was hidden had become a glass trap, and the hunters were no longer lurking in the dark. They were crashing through the light. The breach was surgical. No shouts, no demands, just the rhythmic thud of flashbangs and the shattering of reinforced glass. These weren't Crane's street soldiers or hired mercenaries. Their movements were too synchronized, their equipment too advanced. As Ryan dove behind a heavy oak desk, returning fire with suppressed rounds, he realized with a sinking heart that he was looking at his own reflection. These were federal agents. The very people he once considered brothers in arms were now moving in for the kill, their faces hidden behind cold, ballistic visors. Pinned down and outgunned, Ryan was forced into a corner as a senior official stepped through the smoke, his polished shoes stepping over the debris without a hint of hesitation. This was the moment the world tilted on its axis. The official didn't come to arrest Victor Crane. He came to protect him. The horrifying truth spilled out like venom. Crane wasn't just a ghost in the machine. He was a national asset. For years, the government had been shielding his atrocities, using his vast criminal network to gather intelligence that clean agencies couldn't touch. To the state, Crane's victims were just acceptable collateral damage in a much larger, darker game. The cruelty of the situation reached its peak when the lead agent knelt beside the restrained Ryan. There would be no trial, no public hearing, and no heroic end. The plan was as efficient as it was heartless. They were going to stage a suicide. They had already prepared the narrative, a decorated veteran, broken by the weight of PTSD and the ghosts of his past, finally snapping and taking his own life in a fit of madness. As they pressed his own service weapon against his temple, Ryan realized the true nature of his enemy. He wasn't just fighting a criminal, he was fighting a system that had decided he was disposable. The very flag he fought for was now the shroud they intended to bury him in. The air was thick with the metallic scent of gunpowder and the suffocating weight of betrayal. Ryan and Emma were backed into a corner, staring down the cold muzzles of rifles held by men who wore the masks of federal agents but served the whims of a shadow. Just as the hammer was about to fall, the darkness was shattered. A phalanx of state police cruisers roared onto the scene, their sirens wailing like banshees in the night. Captain Sarah Reyes stepped out, her silhouette framed by the blinding strobe of emergency lights. With a voice like cracking ice, she commanded the rogue agents to stand down. In that moment, the tide didn't just turn, it surged. Sarah hadn't just brought backup, she had brought the truth, intervening just in time to pull Ryan and Emma from the brink of a shallow grave. Safety was a luxury they couldn't afford for long. In the flickering light of a secluded safe house, an unlikely alliance was forged in the heat of shared desperation. Ryan, the man the system had tried to erase. Chief, the veteran whose loyalty was his shield. Sarah, the last bastion of integrity in a compromised force. And Emma, the witness who refused to be silenced. They stood over a tattered map of the county's private airfield, Crane's final exit strategy. The atmosphere was heavy with the realization that there was no turning back. They weren't just planning a raid, they were orchestrating a revolution against a titan. Every exit, every guard tower, and every flight path was scrutinized. They were 4 souls against a private army, but they had one advantage. Crane still thought he was the hunter. For Ryan, this moment marked the final death of his innocence. He had spent his life believing in the structure of the law, the sanctity of the badge, and the idea that the good guys always had the weight of the world behind them. But as he looked at Sarah, the only one left who still wore the uniform with honor, he realized the system was a hollow shell, easily inhabited by monsters like Crane. The realization was bitter, like ash in his mouth. He no longer sought a trial or a courtroom. He sought an ending. His faith in the grand machinery of justice had evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharpened resolve to execute justice with his own hands. When the law becomes a tool for the corrupt, the only true law is the one written in lead and fire. The target was now clear, the private hangar at the edge of the city. Crane was preparing to vanish, intending to take his secrets and his blood-soaked wealth to a place where the reach of the law couldn't follow. The airfield was a fortress, swarming with elite mercenaries who were paid to ask no questions and leave no survivors. As the storm clouds gathered overhead, mirroring the tempest brewing in Ryan's heart, the group prepared for their final move. They weren't just going there to stop a flight. They were going to dismantle an empire piece by piece. The plan was set. The weapons were loaded. And as the first cracks of thunder shook the ground, the architects of retribution moved into the shadows, ready to strike the heart of the beast. The roar of the jet engines drowned out the howling wind, but it couldn't silence the thunder in Ryan's heart. He had tracked them to the edge of the city, to the very last gate of escape. Ahead, on the rain-drenched tarmac of Runway 4, stood Crane's private army, a wall of elite mercenaries armed to the teeth, shielding the man who had orchestrated so much misery. This wasn't just a rescue mission anymore, it was a reckoning. Ryan didn't wait for a signal. He moved like a shadow birthed from the storm, his rifle spitting fire as he initiated a symphony of chaos. The air was instantly filled with the sharp scent of ozone and gunpowder, the silence of the night shattered by the rhythmic clatter of automatic fire. The battlefield was a maze of steel and fire. Ryan surged forward, using every piece of airport equipment as cover, his movements a lethal dance of precision and rage. Crane's men were professionals, but they were fighting for a paycheck. Ryan was fighting for a soul. One by one, the mercenaries fell, their screams swallowed by the jet's turbine whine. But as the gap closed, Crane, desperate and cornered, grabbed a trembling hostage, pulling them in front of him like a human shield. He backed toward the open hangar of the plane, a cruel, jagged smile twisting his face. He knew the rules of engagement. Ryan couldn't shoot. The standoff felt like an eternity, the tension thick enough to choke on. That was when Scout proved that heroes don't always wear uniforms. The small dog, who had followed Ryan through every circle of this urban hell, didn't hesitate. Seeing his master blocked and the villain gloating, Scout became a golden streak of lightning. With a ferocious snarl, he launched himself from the shadows, his teeth sinking into Crane's forearm. The sudden searing pain forced the villain to scream, his grip loosening and the hostage stumbling away. It was the split second Ryan needed, a window of time bought with the courage of a four-legged companion. Crane swung his heavy pistol toward the dog, a look of pure malice in his eyes, but he was too slow. A single deafening shot rang out, echoing across the hangar. Crane collapsed, the weapon sliding from his nerveless fingers as he hit the cold, wet asphalt. The mastermind of the international trafficking ring, the man who thought he was untouchable, was finally brought low. As Ryan rushed to Scout's side, the horizon was suddenly flooded with the blue and red strobe lights of 100 police cruisers. The encrypted files Ryan had leaked earlier had done their job. The authorities were finally here to reclaim the night. The shadowy empire Crane had built was being dismantled in real time, its secrets laid bare before the world. On that lonely runway, amidst the smell of spent brass and rain, the tide had finally, irrevocably turned. The smoke of the battlefield has finally cleared, replaced not by the cold silence of the grave, but by the warm, vibrating hum of lives reclaimed. Among the many messages flooding in, one stands out, a video from Sarah, the girl whose life hung by a thread in the dark heart of the conspiracy. In the footage, her face is no longer pale with terror. Her eyes sparkle with a newfound strength. She speaks of the guardian angels who appeared when hope was a dying ember. For Ryan, hearing her voice isn't just a thank you, it's the sound of a debt being paid to the universe. It is the living proof that the blood spilled was not in vain, and that from the ashes of destruction, the flowers of a new beginning are starting to bloom for dozens of families. For the first time in a decade, the man who lived as a ghost in his own country feels the weight on his shoulders begin to dissolve. Ryan sits on the porch of his secluded cabin, the rhythmic breathing of Scout at his side acting as a metronome for his soul. He looks at his hands that were once trained only to dismantle, to strike, and to destroy. But as he watches Scout wag his tail at the sound of a distant bird, Ryan realizes a profound truth. He is no longer a weapon of war discarded by a system that forgot him. He is a protector. The trauma that once felt like a cage has been forged into a shield. And the scars he carries are no longer marks of shame, but medals of a different kind of service, one fueled by love rather than orders. The healing process is not a sudden burst of light, but a slow, steady dawn. Ryan watches the world move on, no longer as an outsider looking through a glass wall, but as a man who has earned his place within it. The nightmares of the desert and the screams of the fallen are still there, tucked away in the corners of his mind, but they no longer hold the power to paralyze him. Beside him, Scout trots with a renewed sense of purpose, his ears perked, his spirit unbroken. Together, they have transitioned from the shadows of a secret war to the sunlight of a quiet peace. They are the silent sentinels who walk through hell so that others could stay in the light, finding their own salvation in the very lives they chose to save. Tobacco smoke and the chill of the late afternoon hung over the chief's office. After the terrifying events, the atmosphere between the two men was no longer that of a superior and subordinate, but the understanding of those who had walked through the dark regions of the soul. The chief slowly pushed a thick file folder toward Ryan. This wasn't a standard summons, but an offer that would completely change the trajectory of his life. A special unit was being formed, a ghost within the legal system with a single goal: to wipe out transnational human trafficking rings, the ones ordinary laws sometimes couldn't touch. The chief looked straight into Ryan's eyes, his voice deep with expectation. He knew Ryan was tired. He knew this soldier's heart was crisscrossed with scars from the battlefield to the city streets. But he also knew that no one was more suitable than Ryan to lead this darkness against the other darkness. The file opened up the most brutal hidden corners of society, where humans were treated as goods, where cries for help were buried under indifference and corruption. This wasn't just a job, it was an unending hunt. Ryan remained silent for a long time, his eyes following the streetlights beginning to flicker on down below. In his mind right now, it wasn't about noble medals or the abstract ideals of protecting justice he had learned in the military. He didn't think about the nation or the system. Instead, he saw Emma's radiant smile when she was safe, and the image of Scout, the loyal friend who had gone through life and death with him. He realized that he was no longer fighting for distant concepts. He fought for specific faces, for the small souls who needed someone to stand up and protect them when the whole world turned its back. "I agree," Ryan spoke, his voice steely like the sound of clashing metal. He took the file, feeling the weight of the fates resting in his hands. This time, he stepped into the war with a completely different mindset. No longer a pawn on the chessboard of political forces, Ryan was now a true hunter. He accepted venturing into the gray zone of morality, where the line between good and evil becomes blurred, as long as he could ensure that no other Emma would have to experience that nightmare. The new journey had begun, and the perpetrators out there still didn't know that their greatest nightmare had just nodded to accept the game. The echoes of gunfire and the cold shadows of the underworld have finally faded, replaced by the gentle hum of a life reclaimed. Ryan's mother's house, once a silent mausoleum of grief and dusty memories, has been transformed. It is no longer just a structure of wood and stone. It has become a sanctuary. The windows, once shuttered against the world, are now thrown wide open, allowing the scent of blooming jasmine and the rhythmic sound of neighborhood life to drift through the halls. Here, in the quiet corners where loneliness used to dwell, laughter now takes root, anchoring Ryan to a reality he once thought he had lost forever. At the heart of this new world is Scout, the battle-hardened companion who once navigated minefields and stared down killers, now finds his greatest mission in the simple joys of a home. He is the silent guardian of their peace, his steady breathing a metronome that calms the lingering tremors in Ryan's hands. Whether he's chasing shadows in the backyard or resting his heavy head on Emma's lap, Scout is the living bridge between the trauma of the past and the hope of the future. He isn't just a pet. He is the soul of the house, a constant reminder that even the most broken among us can find a way back to the light. Emma's presence has brought a softness that Ryan never knew he deserved. Together they have turned the remnants of a shattered life into a mosaic of shared moments, morning coffees in the sun-drenched kitchen, long walks at dusk, and the comfortable silence of two people who no longer need to look over their shoulders. The scars on Ryan's body remain, and the memories of the war he fought in the dark alleys of the city will never fully vanish. But they no longer define him. He has learned that bravery isn't just about surviving a firefight. It's about having the courage to be happy, to let someone in, and to build something beautiful from the ruins. As the sun sets over their home, casting long, purple shadows across the lawn, a profound truth settles over them. We often tell ourselves that we are the ones who rescue animals, that we pluck them from the streets or the line of fire to give them a better life. But as Ryan looks at Scout and then at Emma, he realizes the roles were reversed all along. In the darkest hours of his journey, when his spirit was drowning in a sea of violence and regret, it was the unwavering loyalty of a four-legged friend that kept him afloat. We don't just save them. They are the silent healers, the ones who reach into the wreckage of our hearts and pull us back to the surface. Truly, they are the ones who save our souls. As the echoes of the final gunshots fade and the dust of the battlefield settles, we are left with more than just a tale of survival. This story has been a breathtaking roller coaster, a masterclass in storytelling that seamlessly weaves the cold, hard steel of Navy SEAL operations with the warm, beating heart of a canine companion. It's rare to find a narrative that hits this hard, balancing the tactical precision of urban warfare with the raw, unspoken language of a bond that transcends species. We didn't just watch a mission. We witnessed a transformation of the soul through the eyes of a warrior and his most trusted ally. What makes this journey truly unforgettable is its perfect duality. On one hand, you have the SEAL fire, the high-octane, heart-pounding action that keeps you on the edge of your seat, feeling every vibration of the helicopter blades and every click of a safety being disengaged. But on the other hand, there is a profound emotional depth. This isn't just about a man and his dog. It's about two broken soldiers finding a reason to keep fighting in each other. It's a reminder that even in the darkest corners of a corrupt world, the purest form of love and loyalty can still bloom, acting as a compass when all other moral signals have been jammed. The core message of this story rings louder than any explosion. True courage is the audacity to stand against the tide, even when that tide is controlled by those in the highest seats of power. It challenges us to look at the concept of monsters, showing us that they aren't always found in the shadows of a battlefield, but often hide behind polished mahogany desks and gold-plated titles. Through the lens of this SEAL and his dog, we've learned that loyalty isn't a rank or a command. It is a sacred vow. It is the willingness to walk into the fire for someone who would do the same for you, without hesitation and without fear. As we close the final chapter of this epic saga, I want to turn the lens back to you. We've seen how one dog changed the life of a hardened warrior, giving him a reason to live and a cause to die for. Do you have a story like that? Has a pet ever stepped into your life and changed your world, or perhaps even saved you in a way words can't describe? Share your stories in the comments below. I read every single one of them. Thank you for riding along on this intense journey with me. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into the world's most gripping stories. Until next time, stay loyal, stay brave, and I'll see you in the next video.